Brian, how you doing today?
Good. How are you doing, Sam?
I'm doing great. Hey, Brian, I know we don't have a lot of time, but before we get started with any podcast, we have to do what is called the over-the-top intro because we're super grateful for people like you just giving us the time of day. Is that all right? Can we butter your bread a little bit?
Yeah, go for it. Let's go.
Let's get into it. My next guest is an award-winning filmmaker, director, writer, producer. He is the pride of Arizona State University's creative writing department. Go Sun Devils. He has been deemed a prolific genre filmmaker by the LA Times, and he's just about to show you why. Because he has a new project coming out called Clear Cut, opening in theaters, in digital, and on demand starting July 19th. Brian Skiba, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Mhm.
Oh, for sure, man. You are an action movie general. I got a chance to check this out. Not only while checking this out, I saw some of your earlier work, and you get it. I maybe it's me. I'm a child of the 80s, 90s action flicks where it was practical. It made sense. It wasn't a lot of far-fetched ideas, and this one did just that. So how did you get in the clear cut? What brought you on board?
I was actually supposed to direct a Bruce Willis movie for a producer, and then Bruce, he became a little too ill and announced his retirement because again, I'm like you, 80s, 90s action, love it. That's when I grew up. That's why my dad, we watch it every weekend, every night, whatever we can. And so I'm a child of those films and so the opportunity to work with Bruce was just like, wow, this is going to be amazing. But Bruce unfortunately got ill, and that producer was like, well, what else do you have? Let's do it. Let's do an action thriller. Let's find something. And so I scoured for scripts, and I didn't want to just do the standard kind of like meatheads shooting themselves up kind of movie. I wanted to find something that had a little meaning, a little something behind it. And so I went to Eric Bromberg, who did the second with me, and Eric had this in his war chest and sent it over. And I thought it was great. It's got twists and turns. It's got a lot of humanity behind it. It has kind of like that. It feels like Commando-esque, kind of
Yeah.
vibe, right? So that's
Yeah. And in this film, the worlds of drug dealing and logging, two very different professions that you can pretty much everything can hurt you is in this world. What made you have fun with both? Well, both of those worlds. With some of your cast, and we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah, no, I mean that's funny because that's what the writer told me. I asked the writer, I was like, so why logging? I was like, and I mean, I find it super interesting, but why? And he said the same thing you just said. He's like, well, because logging is the world's most dangerous profession, and drug dealing is probably right behind it. It's like you're talking about two of the world's most dangerous professions, and I wanted to jam them together, and I was like, oh, it's pretty genius, man. So that was the genesis behind this thing was taking two very dangerous professions and jamming them together. And then I think police work was probably like the third most dangerous, I mean, so it worked out. So
So I know you didn't get a chance to work with Bruce. I love Bruce. I don't know if you see the Die Hard poster behind me, but your cast was no slouches either. I mean, you brought this film to they really brought this with an all-star cast. I mean, you had Clive Stanton, Jesse Metcalf, you had Tom Welling, you had Superman. I mean, like you like, what was it about playing with this all-star cast? Not to mention Alec Baldwin, Stephen Dorff. How was it just directing this cast of all-stars?
it was amazing. It was amazing. I mean, Clive set the tone. I mean, he's Rolo Vikings. And he was there first actually before anybody else got there. We had him for like 2 days on his own, And Clive is one of these kind of Meisner-esque actors where it's like I'm going to do everything for real, and he would tell me on Vikings he and Travis would have competitions on who would do the most gnarly thing. And so so he kind of set the tone of like it's going to be 150% or not at all. And I'm one of those directors that's the same way. It's like I have the camera on me, I'm getting caught on fire, I'm doing whatever it takes to get the shot. And so between the two of us just being one of those guys that just, it doesn't matter if it's muddy or not, we're getting in. That I think the rest of the cast was just like, wow, this is cool. Let's really put it all out there. And so it was great, man. I mean, sometimes you worry about clash of egos. There was none of that. Everybody, but people were playing golf, on days off together. It was fun, man. It was a lot of fun. So
And the way this movie was shot, where did you shoot it at? It was so beautiful, even before the shooting and the fighting and everything else. But where were you?
we were in on Victoria Island in Canada. So we were in a place called Duncan, and a lot of it was actually shot on First Nations land. So it was and they allowed us on there, and they were great supporters and just wonderful people, and they invited us into their homes, and it was just a really great experience as far as outside of the filmmaking. So.
All right. Well, outside of film, let's talk about some of that shooting and fighting and violence because you got some pretty gnarly fight scenes in here. What was it about the choreography? Can you walk me through that a little bit? Because some of the stuff, as I mentioned earlier, is very practical. It made sense, but how was that behind the scenes, I guess, with the choreography?
It was cool because a lot of these guys really wanted to fight. It was like, we had the stunt guys. We actually had SAG come on set, which was, they drove all the way out in the middle of nowhere. They sent this guy from LA, flew him up just to go sit on our set and watch us, and he watched us for a couple of days, and then was like, "You guys are cool," and took off. And I don't know what he did after that, you know. Um, but yeah, I mean, I had a stunt coordinator, James Logan, who I've worked with a lot, and James, I'd be like, here's the basis of the fight. Take the actors and go figure it out. And then they'd go rehearse the fight, for a couple of days, and then I'd come watch it, make a few tweaks, and then we shoot it. And that's kind of the process. The special effects guys I had worked with before, and so it's a nice marriage of stunts and special effects, and trying to keep it practical, trying to pay homage to these 90s flicks that we loved so much, and 80s flicks, and so that was my goal.
Now, and this is kind of my last question because I know we're up against it, but like me and you, we come from an era where it was the action movies were just straight up that action movies. What influences did you have from here? I'm guessing maybe a little Deer Hunter, maybe a little sprinkling, maybe a little 48 Hours because of some of I'm doing this without trying to spoil this movie because there
Yeah,
are some parts where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see that. But was
yeah.
there any influences that about this movie that you put into it?
I mean, my favorite, Surviving the Game. I mean, that was like that was one of my favorite movies growing up as a kid. I mean, it was just like, guy taking off the street and throwing into a bunch of guys hunting him. It was just like that was cool, man. That was cool. And so I thought, that had that vibe, right? This guy's just out in the forest, doesn't really have much, he doesn't have weapons, doesn't, he's got to survive, and he's being hunted by these guys and so I think if there was a film I'd point at, it'd kind of be that. But this one obviously had the deeper kind of like, the police drama aspect to it and things like that. So,
All
yeah.
right. Well, I know we're up against it. I only had a short time to talk with you. This movie is awesome. I'm gonna post it all over my socials when this thing comes out. I just want to thank you for just showing up on the podcast and just chopping it up with us for a second.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. So.
All right, Brian. We'll see you later.